population, the limits of connection. Second, though, is the curse of knowledge. Have you heard of the curse of knowledge? Anybody heard this before? This is a fascinating thing. Best way I can illustrate it is with an experiment with you. Are you ready to be some lab rats? I haven't done this in a big group. I've only done it with individuals. I'm interested to do it with you all today. This experiment is called the tapping experiment, 1990. At Stanford University, a student did the tapping experiment. Got two people, one listener, one tapper, in a room, 120 songs. The tapper was supposed to tap out a song and see if the listener could figure it just by the tap. Out of 120 songs, they only got 3 right. I know you can do better. I'm only going to give you 3 songs. I'm expecting 100%. I picked the most recognizable songs possible. All right? You ready for this? Song number 1.
Happy birthday.
Yeah! All right! From the O'Shea corner. Excellent. All right, 1 for 1. This is good. Okay, number 2. This one's going to be a little more challenging. I'm not trying to help you here, but okay. Number 2. That wasn't the chorus. That was anybody?
I don't mind.
Okay, I'll give you the chorus. Nothing? Jeremiah was a bullfrog, was a good friend. Joy to the world, all right? 3 Dog Night version. Okay, last one. This one, an updated, not old stuff. That was too old. I get it. This one's updated. I know somebody's going to get this one, all right? And I'm just going to go straight to the chorus because I don't know the verses. All right, chorus. Nothing? Oh, I got friends in low places where whiskey drowns. Maybe the problem is you're not country music fans. That's fine. Here's the way the curse of knowledge works. The curse of knowledge is this expert gap and this experience gap. We all have stuff in our heads based on our experience, based on our expertise, based on things that we've learned and done. We have this stuff in our heads, and when we interact with somebody else, we kind of assume that that same stuff is in their heads. I'm sitting here going, Garth Brooks, come on, the most popular pop artist in, whatever. So, all right, but so in my head, I'm like, come on, I'm eking it out. Like, can't you hear what I hear? And the answer is no. All you're hearing is tapping. And so this happened to me actually in a bike shop, not in Springfield. I love the bike shops in the Springfield area. This happened to me when I first got into cycling in another nearby central Illinois town that shall remain nameless but rhymes with Bloomington. And it was, I went into this bike shop. I was brand new. All I'd ever ridden was this old repaired dirt bike, and then I bought a Walmart bike thinking I was going to go mountain biking and stuff, which I never did. Just rode around the park. But finally I'm like, okay, I'm going to get into cycling and get healthy. And I went to this store, and they were using these words I didn't understand about the gear and the components and the frame. They're like, what do you want, carbon forks? And I'm like, what do you mean by forks? And suddenly they just started talking down to me. And I was like, wait a second, your bikes are really expensive. Even your cheap ones are going to cost me $450, and you're going to talk down to me right now? Like, you're going to treat me like I don't know anything? I work at a university. No, they don't let me teach students, but still, I work at a university. Like, I'm a smart guy, and I'm here with money, and you're going to talk down to me? And I think that curse of knowledge thing happens to all of us, especially in the business community. There's nobody that knows your business better than you. Nobody. You think about it all the time. You've done research. Maybe you've got certificates and degrees, and somebody's told you you're good at it. People are willing to pay you money to do what you do. You know other people in other places. You get how this works. Nobody knows it better than you. And you got a customer, you got a client coming up wanting help with something. How come they don't get it? What's wrong with this idiot? And that comes out. This curse of knowledge thing, I think, we live in a specialized world. Everybody's got a specialty. Everybody's an expert in something. Everybody is. You're an expert in your thing. Somebody else is an expert in their thing. I love this quote from a plumber that I talked to just a few months ago. He said, it took me 20 years to figure out how to do this in 30 minutes. You're paying for the 20 years. That's a great quote. Because we all look at our plumber and go, you weren't here very long at all. What are you charging me this for? He's like, it took me 20 years to figure out how to do that. You're welcome. Pay up. That whole expertise thing, we all got it. And there's a gap, though. There's a gap between those who know and those who don't. And the stuff that's in your head, not everybody knows. And vice versa, you don't know what's in their head. So what do we have to do if we're living in an increasingly specialized world where everybody's got some of that, and it makes it tough for us to communicate and get things done? We've got to listen loud. I just heard this phrase this morning. I was going to talk about empathy, but empathy just makes us all kind of like roll our eyes because it's like this soft skill, psychological thing, we get from therapy. I'm like, well, that sounds flowery, and I don't want to do that. Don't have time for empathy. But listen loud? What do you mean? What do you mean? I'll listen loud. Here's what I think listening loud is. The Harvard Business Review says that there are 4 steps to empathy. Harvard Business Review actually says empathy is an important thing in business. But here's the 4 steps of empathy. It's listening, acknowledging, caring, and acting. And sometimes when we think about empathy, we just like the listening part. You just got to really listen well. Nod your head a little bit, give them some body language, right? That's empathy. That's not empathy. That's just the first step. Acknowledging, the second step, is actually noticing the feelings in the other person. This is you going to point A. Rather than trying to just jump to point B, the solution, you're going to point A by starting with the person who's in front of you. And you're getting inside their head and heart, trying to listen in a way where you're actually learning what their feelings are. And then you're acknowledging those feelings. Whether you agree with them or not doesn't matter. Whether they're justified in your opinion or not doesn't matter. You're just acknowledging, hey, that's a feeling. Humans have those. I get feelings like twice a week. I know that's like a feeling, fine. But then you move to the third thing, and that's caring. Now what you're going to do is you're actually going to express your own feeling. Okay, you have a feeling, I have a feeling too. So I'm going to meet you at point A, because I'm trying to lead you here. I'm going to meet you at point A with my feeling and your feeling at the same time. And then you act. Our jobs as my job is preaching, and your job is solving people's problems that they're willing to pay you money for. They're not so different. Some people think that all preachers do is talk, but the reality is I only spend about 30 minutes of my week talking. The rest of my week is listening. Listening to the Bible, or listening to history, or listening to people, listening to staff members, trying to listen to God, trying to listen. Listening is most, if I'm going to be decent at saying anything, I've got to listen a whole lot more. I speak. And same thing for you. You're not just solving people's problems. You're listening to what those problems are, what they mean, and the trouble they're causing people. And that's really where you can listen loud, is not just I'm listening passively, but I'm engaged in the listening, and I'm going to let you know that. I'm meeting you at point A so that we can go to point B together. We've got a problem with the limits of connection. We've got a problem with the curse of knowledge because we live in a specialized world. Last thing is this, the failure of nerve. We've got a problem. Your customers are coming to you with this failure of nerve issue, and we all deal with it. We live in an anxious world, don't we? I mean, just today we're worried about World War III. Poland got a missile from Russia. What's going on? Trump, yes. Oh, no. Trump, no. Oh, no. The housing market's changing, and then Elon hasn't fixed Twitter yet. I mean, he said he was going to get it done. He can make a rocket land on its butt, but Twitter's not fixed yet. I mean, so we just live in an anxious world, and we've been through something. We've been through something that's not over yet the last few years, and trying to figure out how to move next. This part of this talk, this failure of nerve thing, is coming actually from Edwin Freeman. He wrote a book that's just swept business leaders. You should read it. It's great. He's talking about what happens in business when we defer to empathy and anxiety or data. That we have this bias where too often in business we allow the most anxious voices in the room to have all the power. So we're sitting in a meeting with a team trying to make a decision, and somebody's anxious about whatever we're doing. They're anxious about the money, they're anxious about the workforce, they're anxious about the time, they're anxious about the product, they're anxious about the clarity, whatever they're anxious. They're anxious. And so the whole room stops progress because, oh, we got to pay attention to the anxious person. Now, we're not talking about personal anxiety. Personal anxiety is the thing that needs some attention. We're talking about professional anxiety when you're trying to make decisions together. And when you tilt toward the anxiety, what you're doing is you're empowering the weakest person in the room at the time. It doesn't mean they're the weakest person all the time, but in that moment, you're letting the weakest person drive the pace, drive the direction, and all that. He says, don't do that. That's a failure of nerve. But also our need for data. We constantly want to measure everything and have data for everything. We want to have a data-driven reason for everything so that we don't look stupid on the other side and we won't get fired because we had this great reason. And data might be a great reason, but data doesn't make great decisions. Humans have to make decisions with wisdom, calculating risk, taking a chance. And so he says a failure of nerve is where we find ourselves. And we have so much anxiety for so many reasons, we're losing the ability to make good decisions together. Now, I had to read this book twice because I'm not very smart and I wasn't understanding it. And I was focused on the failure of nerve. Yeah, right. Stop giving all the power to the anxious people. Let's just go. Let's charge. And so we got to be strong, you know. Be cold and strong and heartless, and that's good business. I thought that as a preacher. That was not very smart. But when I read it the second time, I was like, oh, wait a second. The failure of nerve isn't just to be strong. The failure of nerve is to be strong while feeling. And here's how it's captured. You talked about a non-anxious presence. Maybe because I have some anxiety, I was focusing on the non-anxious parts. Don't be anxious. Don't give power to anxiety. Non-anxious presence. I was emphasizing the first part. The second time I realized he was emphasizing the second part. You stay in the room with anxiety. You stay around the table when there's uncertainty, when you're not sure what to do. You hold space and hold presence. And I realized it's really the picture of the spine. It's really what it means to have a spine. The spine is this bony, tough object that has to withstand forces that are pulling on it from every side and every angle. And it could bend and contort. To have a straight spine is quite a feat when you think about it. Like to be able to hold your posture when you've got all kinds of pressure pulling at you and pushing at you from every angle. That's a feat all by itself. But the other thing a spine's job is to do is not just to hold posture. The spine's job is to protect the spinal cord. And the spinal cord still has to have contact with the nerve endings and feel something. When you live in an anxious world and you're dealing with people's problems all the time and things are chaotic and crazy and you're not sure what's next, it's so easy to say, yeah, I got to be cold and just hold. A non-anxious presence isn't about being cold. A non-anxious presence is about holding steady and feeling at the same time. Can you still feel your own feelings and can you still feel what other people are feeling? Because if you're going to meet people at point A, hoping to move them to point B, you're going to need to be able to feel what they're feeling. You might hold steady, you might not give ground, you might not stop progress, but you're at least going to take a moment to feel. Where I learned this personally was as a dad. So I have 3 kids. My son's 25. He's married. I'm going to be a grandpa in January.
Yeah.
So they live in Kansas City. My daughter's finishing her master's degree at UIS, and she's 24. We're really happy about that. But I have another daughter who died when she was 6, back in 2008. She was sick her whole life. She never walked or talked. She was in a wheelchair, had seizures every day. She was at the 3-month level developmentally. So we were in the hospital a lot, right here at St. John's. It's part of the reason why I'm still in Springfield. St. John's did awesome for us. Love all the hospitals and medical community here, but we have personal connections here. It was really awesome. But I learned really quick that the specialists are awesome. You get information from specialists, but they're not around, and they're not the real help. I learned residents you want to avoid. They're not helpful at all. That's just personal baggage. I'm sorry. The real help in a hospital is a nurse.
Yeah.
A nurse. See, the specialists, they got great information, it's technical, and they can help you make technical decisions and all that stuff. And residents can come in and confuse the whole thing. But nurses are there. They can get things done. We were in a situation in 2007 where they told us after a really big seizure that morning that my daughter was brain dead, and so we were having to make this decision. What are we going to do with her life? We were put in a very terrible situation. What do we do? And all I could think about was my other 2 kids. Like, what are we going to do for them? Like, how are they going to do this? Because they're like 8 and 12, or 8 and 10 at the time. I'm like, this is going to scar them for life, and I don't want to be part of that. And I couldn't figure out how to be a dad to all these kids in such different situations. And then my wife was just on her own, like, whatever, I can't help you. And she's like, yeah, I know I'm on my own. You're a mess. And so we're going through all this. And actually, there was somebody who gave us some brilliant advice. A nurse said this. Firefighters will tell you that at the scene of a fire, you got to watch out, because kids will run back into a burning building if they think their parents are in there. Kids will run back into a burning building if they think their parents are in there, because the safest place to a kid is with their parents. So what the nurse was telling me is, no matter how anxious you feel, just be present. Let your kids see what you're feeling. Be there with them in the chaos, in the moment, in the pain, in the whatever. Be with them. And they will be, as long as they feel safe and they're with you, it'll be okay. I've never forgotten that. What great advice. And I wonder if it's great advice for the challenges you deal with. You know, nobody knows what's happening in the labor force, what's happening with inflation, what's happening politically, and maybe we're a little scared of all those things globally and what's on the horizon. Who knows? You look at what the tech sector is laying off, and there are a lot of reasons to get nervous and panicky and whatever. But is it possible to hold a non-anxious presence? To continue to feel what you feel, what others are feeling. Because my guess is your customers and your clients and the people who have customer service issues, and they're lighting up the phones because they need help and they need action, they need information, they need something different. Maybe what they're looking for is not just a solution, but also safety. And the brilliance of the customer service movement is you're giving that to people. Here's the thing, I opened up talking about the fact that I happen to follow Jesus. Here's what's inspiring to me about Jesus and the fact that he washed feet. You know, actually, the Bible and in my faith, God's not actually asking for people to be leaders. What he's doing is he's asking people to be servants, and he turns that into leadership. And that's really what y'all do. That's what customer service is all about. You're choosing to lower yourself to the dirty job and the needs of another person. You're meeting them at point A, no matter what their messiness is, no matter what their challenges are. You're going to meet them there, feel what they feel, and have your own feelings about it. But then you're steadily going to move to point B, and you're going to lead them. But the leading is a byproduct of serving. That's a pretty heroic work. That's a really necessary work in today's day and time. I had to renew my life insurance policy this year just because it's time. I'm not only going to be a grandpa, I'm going to be 50. So there you go. It's time. Got to get a new life insurance policy, which means a ton of medical things because nobody wants to insure somebody like me until you get all that stuff figured out. So, okay. I've been doing a lot with the hospital community. That's a tough business right now. And there are some people who know how to help people navigate all that, the appointments, the paperwork, the billing, the whatever. There's some people really gifted at helping people manage that. There's people not so gifted and should have a different job. Not with people. And I know you see that every day. You deal with that every day. I wonder if it's a pretty heroic job to just be a servant, providing safety for people who are just trying to manage something fairly traumatic in their own lives. You have no idea what people on the other side of that counter, on the other side of that phone have been going through, what they're feeling in their body, what they're remembering from 5 years old, what news they got that morning. But you get to meet them in a moment, make them feel safe, serve them, and then start the process of moving them from point A to point B. That's a pretty beautiful thing. Thank you for doing that. Keep it up.